And she did not deserve what happened to her. It was despicable. It's still despicable. And these people walk around and try to defend these folks.
6 days after 22-year-old Mya Fuller disappeared, investigators were called to a remote property in Wilson County, Tennessee. What they found there would turn a missing person investigation into a homicide case. Mya had last been seen after working an event at Nashville's got.Some Park on July 30th, 2022. Later that night, she went to the Island nightclub on Antioch Pike. But when her family realized she wasn't coming home, there was one strange detail. Mya's gray Toyota Camry was found near the nightclub. Mya wasn't. Days later, her remains were discovered in a wooded area along Trammell Lane, miles away from where she was last known to be. At first, investigators had to answer a simple question. What happened to Mya after she left that nightclub? But the investigation would become much more complicated, because the people eventually accused in her death had reportedly known Mya for only about 24 hours. And investigators would spend months piecing together those final hours, from where Mya was last seen to the people she encountered, to the evidence that eventually led police to 3 suspects. This is the story of Mya Fuller. But before Mya became the center of an investigation, she was simply a 22-year-old. She lived in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, roughly half an hour from Nashville, and at 22, she was still laying the foundation for her adult life. Her mother described her as a genius, while the people closest to Mya remembered someone hardworking, caring, and deeply connected to her family. There was nothing unusual about the way she lived. She was simply moving through an ordinary young adulthood, one week after another. That routine continued into the final weekend of July 2022. Mya spent Friday around her family, then reported for work Saturday at got.Some Park, Nashville's soccer stadium. She completed her shift and left, just as she normally would have. Nothing about that weekend gave her family a reason to suspect that their familiar routine was about to disappear. The significance of those ordinary moments only became clear later. A goodbye with her relatives carried no warning because nobody knew it needed one. There was no reason to treat it as anything more than another farewell before seeing each other again. For the people who loved Mya, that weekend looked completely ordinary until the events that followed gave those memories an entirely different meaning. Meanwhile, another part of the story was taking shape away from Mya's family. The night before her shift, Mya had crossed paths with 21-year-old Tiana Tipton, a Nashville woman, and the two became involved in an argument. The precise words exchanged have never been fully established, but nothing described in the case suggests that Mya considered the confrontation serious enough to change her plans. Mya went home afterward and continued with her life. By Saturday, she was at work, apparently treating the disagreement as finished. Tipton, however, allegedly viewed the encounter differently. While Mya was carrying on with an ordinary day, someone was searching for her online, looking through her page and trying to establish contact. What began as a few words between 2 young women would soon become the starting point investigators had to examine. But the argument itself was not the case. The case started with what happened after it. By the time Mya was considering what to do that Saturday night, investigators say the people around Tiana Tipton had already begun creating a path that would bring Mya within reach. Tipton allegedly wanted retaliation after their disagreement, but contacting Mya herself carried an obvious problem. Mya had already seen her, so prosecutors say Tipton involved her younger brother, 20-year-old Ty-Sean Bowles, who could approach Mya without the same connection to the earlier confrontation. Bowles allegedly knew what had happened between his sister and Mya, including Tipton's desire to confront her. He then searched social media until he located Mya's profile, despite having never met her and having no personal dispute with her. From there, prosecutors say he initiated contact and presented an invitation to Island Vibes, a club situated along Antioch Pike in South Nashville. From Mya's perspective, the invitation did not necessarily resemble a threat. Island Vibes was a public nightclub, the kind of place where music, crowds, security, and other patrons would normally provide a sense of safety. The person contacting her also appeared disconnected from the argument she had experienced the previous night. For a 22-year-old finishing a Saturday and receiving an invitation to go out, accepting it could look like an ordinary social decision rather than a dangerous one. That distinction became central to the allegations. Mya did not need to make some reckless mistake for the plan to work. According to prosecutors, the people involved simply needed her to accept an invitation and appear at the location. Hours passed between the confrontation and the alleged setup, giving everyone involved opportunities to reconsider what they were doing. Investigators also identified another person allegedly connected to the plan, 20-year-old Lamira Pipkins, who was close to both Tipton and Bowles. Prosecutors say her involvement meant this was not limited to the brother and sister. As evening settled over Nashville, Mya had finished her workday and prepared to go out, while those accused of targeting her were allegedly preparing for her arrival. Then Mya left home and drove toward Antioch Pike. The destination was a nightclub, not a secluded location, and the invitation had come through someone she had no obvious reason to distrust. Mya believed she was heading out for the night. She did not know what had been arranged before she arrived. What happened next started the moment she reached the club. The location Mya entered that night would later become one of the most important places in the investigation. She arrived at Island Vibes shortly after 11 p.m., expecting the kind of Saturday night outing she had been invited to attend. Instead, events eventually moved from the club to its parking area, where the situation took a violent turn. According to the account presented in the case, Tiana Tipton and Lamira Pipkins confronted Mya outside. The confrontation left Mya facing two people at once, away from the activity inside the building. She resisted them, fighting back despite being outnumbered. The medical examiner later documented 2 broken ribs and a fractured leg, injuries that showed the confrontation had gone far beyond a brief altercation. But the parking lot was only the beginning. After the assault, Mya was placed inside the trunk of a vehicle, and the group left the area. Earlier that same day, she had gone to work at Geodis Park after spending time with her family, with no indication that the evening would end this way. A decision to accept an invitation had carried her from a familiar routine into a situation she could no longer control. The vehicle then traveled away from Nashville and crossed into Wilson County. Investigators traced the group to a developing property near Trammell Lane outside Lebanon, an area without nearby homes where activity would have been difficult for others to notice. The distance mattered because Mya had not simply been left where the confrontation began. She was transported somewhere else before the final violence occurred. At that location, the trunk was opened again. Prosecutors say Tipton fired 7 shots at Mya, killing her, before the group departed and returned home. 7 shots were ultimately documented as part of the case, and Mya's body remained at the property after they left. For her family, the painful reality was that Mya had started that day surrounded by ordinary pieces of her life: family, work, and plans for the evening. By the end of the night, she was alone in Wilson County, far from the people who expected to see her again. And the investigation would now have to answer what happened between that invitation and the discovery of her body. But before investigators could answer that, Mya's family was already realizing something was wrong. The first warning sign was not found on the property in Wilson County. It was Mya's car. Her gray Toyota Camry remained at Island Vibes, exactly where she had left it, while Mya herself never returned. Back at home, her family waited for the contact they were accustomed to receiving, and as the hours stretched on without an explanation, concern turned into a missing person report. For several days, there was no clear answer. Family members and investigators were left trying to determine where a 22-year-old woman had gone after leaving the nightclub. Then, on August 6, 2022, roughly a week after Mya was last seen, someone discovered human remains on property near Trammell Lane in Wilson County. The remains were located in a field behind a development, and the medical examiner later identified them as Mya. The examination also established how she died. Multiple gunshot wounds caused her death, while the fractures to her ribs and leg documented the physical assault that occurred beforehand. Those findings gave investigators a clearer picture of Mya's final hours, but identifying the people responsible required an entirely different level of work. The discovery had come after a property owner noticed an unusual odor and activity from buzzards in the area. According to the account shared by the Wilson County Sheriff, people investigating the smell moved down the side of a hill and noticed tennis shoes partially visible in the ground. The location contained areas resembling old bunker structures, where the remains were concealed from ordinary view. That discovery immediately expanded the investigation beyond one location. Mya had disappeared from a Nashville nightclub, her vehicle remained behind, and her remains turned up in another county.
The Welches had called me and said basically, hey, they found a body on our property. And I was like, what? Like, you've got to be kidding me. That they smelt a strange odor, and she thought, well, maybe an animal or something like that, was there, and some buzzards was flying around. And next thing you know, they walk off the side of the hill and find a pair of tennis shoes laying, inside the ground. And they was like, oh my, this is not good.
The Wilson County Sheriff later praised the work of his office, describing the investigation as diligent and emphasizing how quickly authorities identified 3 people allegedly connected to the killing. For Mya's family, however, speed could not undo what had happened. A young woman had vanished after an ordinary night out, and the investigation now had to explain how she ended up hidden on land where nobody expected to find her. The case now crossed county lines, and investigators knew they could not close it alone.
Mya's body was located in a wooded area on Trammell Lane in the southeastern portion of Wilson County. The Wilson County Sheriff's Office continues to stand with the Fuller family. We will not rest until the person or persons responsible for her murder are identified and prosecuted. August 16th, the Wilson County Sheriff's Office released a press release and issued a reward of up to $1,000 by the Wilson County Sheriff's Office for anyone with information that leads to the successful identification and prosecution of the persons or persons responsible. Today, the Wilson County Sheriff's Office will be increasing that reward from $1,000 to up to $5,000 for information that will lead to the identification of the person responsible. Currently, detectives with the Wilson County Sheriff's Criminal Investigation Division continue to investigate these circumstances surrounding the murder of Mya. The investigation is very active at this time, and the Sheriff's Office requests that anyone with any information pertaining to Mya Fuller's murder to contact the Wilson County Sheriff's Office Criminal Investigation Division.
The department was asking the public to provide information that might previously have been withheld. On August 16th, officials had announced a reward of up to $1,000 for information leading to the identification and prosecution of those responsible. During the press conference, that amount increased to as much as $5,000.
To date, friends and family all across the United States have come together and raised $16,000 for the reward fund at this point. And if you couple that with the $5,000 from the Sheriff's Department, the Crime Stoppers, we're at $21,000 and $21,100 right now.
The message from law enforcement was direct. The investigation would continue until those responsible could be identified and prosecuted. For Mya's family, the announcement offered neither an ending nor an answer. It showed that investigators had leads, a timeline, and a growing reward, but still needed someone to reveal what happened. Then came the breakthrough. On January 17th, search warrants were obtained for multiple suspects. Investigators later said the people involved were not longtime acquaintances of Mya, but had become connected within roughly 24 hours of the events leading to her death. Surveillance footage and other evidence eventually helped detectives build their case. Nearly a year after Mya disappeared, authorities announced 3 arrests. A grand jury indicted Diana Tipton, Tyshawn Bowles, and Lamira Pipkins on charges including first-degree murder and kidnapping, with Bowles also facing a charge related to abuse of a corpse. All 3 were held in the Wilson County Jail without bond, while prosecutors said all options remained under consideration in response to questions about the death penalty. For Mya's family, the arrests brought the first major legal step toward accountability, but the pain remained. Her mother made clear that Mya had simply gone to a party and never came home, and as the case moved into court, one answer would finally come from the defendants themselves. When asked how he pleaded, Tyshawn Bowles answered, "Guilty." That guilty plea did not end the case. It moved it into its final stage.
How do you plead, Mr. Bowles?
Guilty.
This morning, Tyshawn Bowles waived his right to a trial, pleading guilty to a lesser charge of facilitation of a specially aggravated kidnapping.
By the time the final defendant stood before a judge, Mya Fuller's family had already spent years living with the consequences of one night. 3 people had been accused in her death, but the courts would not treat their roles identically. Tiana Tipton and Tyshawn Bowles initially faced first-degree murder, kidnapping, and abuse of a corpse charges, while Lamira Pipkins faced first-degree murder. The first major resolution arrived in March 2025. Tipton was approaching trial, with jury selection about to begin, when she changed course and pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, kidnapping, and abuse of a corpse. Prosecutors had prepared to take her case before a jury, and the district attorney later acknowledged that the plea came as a surprise even to his office. The court sentenced Tipton to life in prison, bringing a permanent consequence to the defendant prosecutors said had played the central role in Mya's killing. Bowles' case ended differently. In October 2025, he entered a guilty plea to the reduced charge of facilitation of especially aggravated kidnapping rather than murder. The court imposed a 12-year sentence, with the possibility of release after he served only part of that term. During the proceedings, Bowles acknowledged that he had been present and had watched Mya being assaulted. He also said he heard his sister instruct someone to open the trunk, although he maintained that he never actually saw Mya placed inside the vehicle. His account placed him at the scene while drawing a boundary around what he claimed he personally witnessed. Bowles said he followed his sister's vehicle before losing sight of it in the darkness. Prosecutors explained that the evidence showed him helping bring Mya into the situation, but did not establish that he intended to participate in or personally carry out the killing. For Mya's family, the sentence carried a different weight. Her mother addressed the court and made clear that 12 years did not feel proportionate to the loss of her daughter. Bowles had been the person prosecutors said located Mya online and contacted her with the invitation that brought her toward the events of that night. Yet his punishment remained substantially shorter than the sentences eventually imposed on the other defendants.
And you didn't even give her the grace to just beat her, or just even call the cops. You stood there, walked away, threw your hands up. And you get 12 years? 30% served?
The final case lasted into March 2026. Pipkins had remained the last defendant without a resolution, but on the morning jury selection was scheduled to begin, she pleaded guilty to facilitation of first-degree murder. The court sentenced her to 20 years. After that plea, all 3 cases had reached their legal conclusions, though each defendant had accepted responsibility through a different charge and received a different punishment. The contrast is difficult to miss. Tipton received life in prison. Pipkins received 20 years. Bowles received 12 years with the possibility of release after serving only part of that sentence. Those outcomes reflected the different roles and evidence attributed to each defendant, but they also left Mya's family confronting a result that could never restore what had been taken from them. A sentence can close a courtroom proceeding without resolving every question surrounding a death. Mya was 22, a daughter whose mother remembered her as intelligent, caring, and full of potential. Whatever began with the disagreement between Mya and Tipton eventually moved far beyond the original conflict, involving an online contact, an invitation, and 3 young people whose actions brought Mya to the place where she died. That is what makes the case difficult to reduce to a single courtroom outcome. Mya did not begin that weekend as a name in a criminal file. She was working, spending time with family, and making plans like any other young woman. The lasting lesson is not that Mya should have known. It is that seemingly small conflicts can become dangerous when someone chooses retaliation instead of walking away. Mya Fuller's story now exists in court records, testimony, and the memories of the people who loved her. None of them changes the fact that Mya cannot return home, answer a message, sit with her family, or make the plans that once seemed ordinary. If this story moved you, don't just scroll past it. Like this video so more people hear Mya Fuller's name. Subscribe to Homegirl Missing and turn on notifications because the next case is already waiting. If you have an opinion on these sentences, drop it in the comments. I read them. And share this video with someone who needs to hear what happened to Mya. That's how her story doesn't fade.